The sound of Nathan's laughter drifted through the open window, and my stomach clenched. I knew that laugh. It was the one he reserved for her. I set down my mug of tea with trembling hands and peered out into our backyard. There they were, Nathan and Abigail, heads bent close together over his phone. My husband's childhood friend had become a constant presence in our lives, and I was sick of it. "Hey, you two," I called out, forcing a smile as I stepped onto the patio. "What's so funny?" Nathan looked up, his blue eyes twinkling. "Oh, Molly, come here. You've got to see this video Abby sent me. It's hilarious." I gritted my teeth at the nickname. No one else called her Abby. I walked over, my arms crossed tightly over my chest. Abigail flashed me a bright smile. "Hi, Molly, how are you feeling? Nathan told me you weren't feeling well earlier." "I'm fine," I said curtly. "What's this video about?" Nathan held out his phone, but I made no move to take it. After an awkward moment, he pulled it back. "It's, just a funny cat video. You know how Abby loves those." "Right," I said, "because you two have so much in common." Nathan's brow furrowed. "Molly, what's wrong?" I took a deep breath, trying to calm the anger bubbling inside me. "Nothing. I just thought we were going to have a quiet evening at home. I didn't realize Abigail would be joining us." Again. Abigail's smile faltered. "Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to intrude. I can go." "No." Nathan said quickly. "You're not intruding. Molly's just tired, right, honey?" I stared at him, incredulous. Was he really going to dismiss my feelings like that? "Actually," I said, my voice tight, "I'd like to talk to my husband. Alone." Abigail stood up, smoothing her skirt. "Of course. I should be heading home anyway. Thanks for the coffee, Nathan." As she walked towards the gate, Nathan called out, "Drive safe, Abby." The moment she was out of earshot, I rounded on him. "What the hell, Nathan? We had plans tonight." He held up his hands defensively. "Whoa, calm down. Abigail just stopped by for a quick coffee. It's not a big deal." "It is a big deal," I snapped. "She's always here, always texting you, always the topic of conversation. I'm sick of it." Nathan's face hardened. "She's my oldest friend, Molly. You knew that when we got married." "Friend?" I laughed bitterly. "Is that what you call it when you spend more time with her than your own wife?" "That's not fair," he said, his voice rising. "I work with Abigail. We're on the same project. Of course we spend time together." I shook my head, fighting back tears. "It's more than that, and you know it. The way you look at her, the inside jokes. I feel like I'm the third wheel in my own marriage." Nathan's expression softened. He reached out to touch my arm, but I pulled away. "Molly, honey, you're overreacting. There's nothing going on between me and Abigail. I love you." I wanted to believe him. God, how I wanted to. But the nagging doubt in my gut wouldn't go away. "Then prove it," I said. "Set some boundaries with her. Put our marriage first." Nathan sighed, running a hand through his hair. "You're being ridiculous. I'm not going to cut off my best friend just because you're feeling insecure." His words hit me like a slap. Insecure? Is that what he thought this was? Before I could respond, Nathan's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and I saw Abigail's name flash on the screen. "I have to take this," he said, already turning away. "It's about work." As he walked into the house, answering the call with a cheerful, "Hey, Abby," I stood there, frozen. In that moment, I knew. Something had to change. And if Nathan wouldn't do it, I would have to take matters into my own hands. I stared at the 2 pink lines on the pregnancy test, my heart racing with a mix of joy and dread. After months of trying, we'd finally done it. I was pregnant, but as I stood there in our bathroom, clutching the test, all I could think about was Abigail. Taking a deep breath, I stepped out into the bedroom where Nathan was getting dressed for work. "Nathan," I said, my voice shaky, "I have something to tell you." He turned, his tie hanging loosely around his neck. "What is it, Molly? Is everything okay?" I held out the test. "I'm pregnant." For a moment, Nathan just stared at it, then his face broke into a wide grin. "Oh my God, Molly, that's amazing!" He rushed over and wrapped me in a tight hug. I melted into his embrace, allowing myself a moment of pure happiness. This was what I'd wanted for so long, a family with the man I loved. But then Nathan's phone buzzed, shattering the moment. He pulled away to check it, and I saw that familiar softening of his expression that only happened when Abigail texted. "What is it?" I asked, trying to keep the edge out of my voice. Nathan's smile faltered slightly. "Oh, it's Abigail. She has some news too, apparently. Yeah, she wants to meet up for lunch to tell us." My stomach clenched. "Us? Why does she need to tell us both? He shrugged, already typing a reply. I don't know, but she says it's important. Come on, it'll be fun. We can celebrate our news too. I wanted to argue, to tell him that this should be our moment, just the two of us. But I bit my tongue. Fine, I said. Where are we meeting her? A few hours later, we sat across from Abigail at our usual cafe. She was practically glowing, like her hand resting on her stomach in a way that made my blood run cold. I'm so glad you both could make it, Abigail said, beaming. I have the most wonderful news. I gripped my water glass tightly, already knowing what she was going to say. I'm pregnant, Abigail announced, her eyes shining with tears of joy. Nathan's reaction felt like a punch to my gut. His face lit up and he reached across the table to grab Abigail's hand. Abby, that's incredible! Congratulations! I watched in horror as my husband and his best friend shared a moment of pure elation. It was as if I wasn't even there. Molly? Abigail's voice broke through my shock. Aren't you going to say anything? I plastered on a fake smile. Congratulations, Abigail. That's wonderful news. Nathan turned to me, his eyes dancing with excitement. Can you believe it, Molly? You're both pregnant at the same time. Our kids will grow up together, just like Abby and I did. In that moment, I felt like I was drowning. The thought of our children being as close as Nathan and Abigail made me want to scream. Actually, I said, my voice tight, I'm not feeling well. I think I need to go home. Nathan's brow furrowed with concern. Are you okay? Do you want me to come with you? I shook my head, already standing up. No, you stay. Celebrate with Abigail. I'll be fine on my own. As I walked out of the cafe, I heard Nathan call after me, but I didn't turn back. I couldn't bear to see him comforting Abigail, sharing in her joy while I felt like my world was crumbling. At home, I curled up on our bed, my hand resting on my still flat stomach. This should have been the happiest day of my life. Instead, I felt more alone than ever. My phone buzzed with a text from Nathan. Are you okay? Do you need anything? I stared at the screen, tears blurring my vision. How could I tell him that what I needed was for him to choose me, to put our family first? As I lay there, a resolve began to form in my heart. If Nathan wouldn't set boundaries with Abigail, I would have to take matters into my own hands. For the sake of my child, our child, I had to fight for my marriage. But first, I had to find out exactly what I was up against. The sharp pain in my abdomen jolted me awake. I gasped, clutching my stomach as another wave of agony washed over me. Nathan, I called out, panic rising in my throat. He stumbled into our bedroom, bleary-eyed. Molly, what's wrong? The baby, I choked out. Something's wrong with the baby. The next few hours passed in a blur of ambulance sirens, hospital corridors, and worried doctors. By dawn, I lay in a hospital bed, exhausted and scared, with Nathan holding my hand. The good news is, the baby's okay, the doctor said, her face serious. But you're experiencing some complications, Mrs. Walker. You'll need to be on bed rest for the next few weeks, at least. I nodded, relief washing over me. Our baby was safe, for now. As the doctor left, Nathan squeezed my hand. Don't worry, honey. I'll take care of everything. But over the next few days, it became clear that Nathan's idea of taking care of everything meant calling Abigail for help. I was dozing on the couch when I heard them in the kitchen. Thanks for coming over, Abby, Nathan said. I don't know what I'd do without you. Of course, Abigail replied. Anything for you two. How's Molly doing? She's struggling, Nathan sighed. This bed rest is really getting to her. I clenched my fists, fighting back tears. How dare he discuss me with her like that? Nathan, I called out, my voice sharp. Can you come here, please? He appeared in the doorway, Abigail hovering behind him. What is it, Molly? Do you need something? Yes, I said, sitting up slowly. I need to talk to my husband, alone. Abigail's face fell. Oh, I'll go start on dinner. As soon as she was out of earshot, I turned to Nathan. What is she doing here? He ran a hand through his hair, exasperated. She's helping, Molly. You heard the doctor. You need to rest. And I need my husband, I shot back. Not his, whatever she is to you. Nathan's eyes flashed with anger. She's my friend, Molly. My pregnant friend who's going through this alone. The least we can do is help her out. Help her out? I laughed bitterly. Nathan, I'm your wife. I'm carrying your child, and I'm the one who needs help right now. He softened, sitting on the edge of the couch. I know, honey, and I'm here for you, but Abigail needs us too. I shook my head, tears spilling over. No, Nathan, You need to choose. It's her or me. The silence that followed was deafening. Nathan stared at me, his face a mix of shock and hurt. Molly, you can't ask me to do that. In that moment, something inside me broke. I think you've already made your choice, I whispered. Before Nathan could respond, Abigail's voice drifted in from the kitchen. Nathan? Can you come help me with this? He hesitated, looking between me and the kitchen door. I should. Go, I said, turning away from him. Just go. As Nathan left the room, I heard him and Abigail laughing together in the kitchen. The sound cut through me like a knife. I placed a protective hand over my stomach, a fierce determination taking root in my heart. If Nathan wouldn't put our family first, I would have to take matters into my own hands. Slowly, carefully, I reached for my phone and dialed a number I never thought I'd use. Hello? A gruff voice answered. Richard? I said, my voice trembling. It's Molly. I need your help. Nathan's father was silent for a moment. Then, what's going on, Molly? I took a deep breath, steeling myself. It's about Nathan and Abigail. There's something you and Janet need to know. As I began to speak, I knew there was no going back. But for the sake of my child, I was ready to fight, even if it meant tearing everything apart. The tiny microphone felt like a lead weight in my hand. I stared at it, my heart pounding with a mix of guilt and determination. Was I really going to do this? Spy on my own husband? Molly? Sarah's voice snapped me back to reality. My old college roommate stood in my living room, concern etched on her face. Are you sure about this? I nodded, swallowing hard. I have to know, Sarah, for my sake and for my baby's. She sighed, running a hand through her short blonde hair. I get it. This is a big step. There's no going back once you do this. I know, I whispered, but I can't live like this anymore. The constant doubt, the suspicion, it's eating me alive. Sarah squeezed my shoulder. Okay, let's do this then. With trembling hands, I unzipped Nathan's work bag. The guilt threatened to overwhelm me, but I pushed it down. I thought of all the late nights at the office, the secretive text messages, the way his eyes lit up when Abigail walked into a room. No, I had to know the truth. I carefully tucked the tiny microphone into a hidden pocket, making sure it was secure. Just as I zipped the bag closed, I heard the front door open. Molly, I'm home! Panic surged through me. Quick, I hissed to Sarah. Act natural! Nathan walked into the living room, his eyebrows raising in surprise. Oh, hey, Sarah, I didn't know you were coming over. Sarah plastered on a smile. Just checking on the mama-to-be. How are you, Nathan? As they made small talk, I tried to calm my racing heart. Had he noticed anything amiss? But Nathan seemed oblivious, kissing me on the cheek before heading to the kitchen. I've got to run, he called out, meeting Abigail for dinner to go over some work stuff. Of course he was. I clenched my fists, forcing myself to sound casual. Okay, honey, have fun. As soon as the door closed behind him, I collapsed onto the couch, my legs shaking. Sarah sat beside me, her face grim. You okay? I nodded, unable to speak. What had I just done? The next few days were torture. Every time Nathan left the house, I found myself glued to my phone, listening intently through the app connected to the microphone. Most of it was mundane, work conversations, small talk with colleagues, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing something. Then, on the third day, I heard it. Abby, we need to talk. Nathan's voice was low, serious. My heart stopped. This was it. I know, Nate. Abigail replied, her voice thick with emotion. I can't keep doing this. It's not fair to anyone. You're right, Nathan sighed. We have to tell her. Molly deserves to know the truth. Tears streamed down my face as I listened. My worst fears confirmed. They were having an affair, and now they were planning to come clean. But as I continued to listen, my confusion grew. Something wasn't adding up. They weren't talking about a romantic relationship at all. Instead, I heard phrases like genetic testing and family history. Suddenly, the truth hit me like a ton of bricks. My hand flew to my mouth, stifling a gasp. Abigail wasn't just Nathan's childhood friend. She was his half-sister. The revelation left me reeling. All this time, I'd been suspicious of the wrong thing entirely. But why had they kept this a secret? And what did it mean for our baby? As I sat there, my mind racing, I knew I had a decision to make. Do I confront Nathan with what I've learned, or do I wait for him to come to me? One thing was certain. Nothing would ever be the same again. And as I placed a protective hand over my growing belly, I realized that the stakes were higher than ever. Whatever came next, I had to be ready to fight for my family, no matter the cost. I sat in my car, parked across the street from the little cafe where Nathan and Abigail were meeting. My hands shook as I adjusted the earpiece connected to the listening device in Nathan's bag. This was it, the moment of truth. "Are you sure you want to do this, Molly?" Sarah's voice crackled through my phone. It's not too late to turn back. I took a deep breath. "I have to know, Sarah. For my sanity, for my baby, I need to hear it for myself." As if on cue, Nathan's voice came through the earpiece. "Abby, we can't keep doing this. It's tearing me apart." My heart clenched. Here it was, the confession I'd been dreading and expecting in equal measure. "I know, Nate," Abigail replied, her voice thick with emotion. "But what choice do we have? If we tell Molly the truth, it could destroy everything." Tears blurred my vision as I listened, each word a dagger to my heart. But nothing could have prepared me for what came next. "She deserves to know that her baby might be at risk," Nathan said. "The genetic testing results." I froze. Genetic testing? What were they talking about? Abigail's voice trembled. "I know, but how do we tell her that that he's my father too? That there's a chance our babies could have the same genetic disorder?" The world tilted on its axis. I gripped the steering wheel, trying to make sense of what I just heard. Abigail was Nathan's half-sister? This wasn't an affair. It was something far more complicated. "We have to tell her," Nathan insisted. "And my parents. God, Dad doesn't even know about you. This is such a mess." I sat there, stunned, as they continued to talk. The pieces started to fall into place. The secretive conversations, the intense bond, the shared worry over their pregnancies. It wasn't betrayal I'd been sensing, but fear and guilt over a family secret. Suddenly, a tap on my window made me jump. I looked up to see Richard, Nathan's father, peering in at me with concern. "Molly? What are you doing out here?" Panic surged through me. I scrambled to turn off the listening device and hide the earpiece. "Richard, I was just—" But as I looked into his eyes so similar to Nathan's, and I now realized, to Abigail's, something in me snapped. I got out of the car, my legs shaky but my resolve firm. "We need to talk, Richard. All of us." His brow furrowed. "What's going on, Molly?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what I was about to do. "I know about Abigail. I know she's your daughter." The color drained from Richard's face. How did you—" "It doesn't matter," I said, my voice stronger than I felt. "What matters is that we're all going to sit down and talk about this, now." Before he could respond, I marched towards the cafe, Richard trailing behind me in shocked silence. As I pushed open the door, Nathan and Abigail looked up, their faces paling at the sight of us. "Molly?" Nathan stood, his voice filled with confusion and fear. "Dad? What's going on?" I looked at each of them in turn. My husband, his secret sister, their father. The weight of their secrets, of my own actions, pressed down on me, but I refused to buckle under it. "What's going on?" I said, my voice steady, "is that we're going to have a long overdue family meeting, and we're going to start with the truth. All of it." As I sat down at their table, I knew there was no turning back. Whatever happened next would change all of our lives forever. But for the sake of my child, of all our children, I was ready to face it head on. The tension in Janet's living room was suffocating. I sat on the edge of the sofa, my hands protectively cradling my swollen belly as I faced the people who had turned my world upside down. Nathan paced nervously, unable to meet anyone's eyes. Abigail perched on an armchair, her face pale and drawn. Richard stood by the fireplace looking like a man about to face a firing squad. And Janet, bless her heart, bustled about offering tea and cookies as if this were just another family gathering. "Enough," I said, my voice cutting through the awkward silence. "It's time we all laid our cards on the table." Nathan stopped pacing, his eyes finally meeting mine. "Molly, I don't know where to start." "How about with the truth?" I snapped, my patience wearing thin. "The whole truth, Nathan, about you and Abigail." Janet gasped, nearly dropping the tea tray. "What about Nathan and Abigail?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "They're half-siblings. Isn't that right, Richard?" The room fell silent. All eyes turned to Richard, who seemed to age a decade in that moment. "It's true," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Abigail is my daughter. I had an affair years ago. I never knew about her until recently." Janet's face crumpled. "Richard, how could you?" As Janet's sobs filled the room, I turned to Nathan and Abigail. "And you two? How long have you known?" Nathan ran a hand through his hair. "A few months. We found out when Abigail was doing some genetic testing for her pregnancy. The doctor noticed some similarities in our family histories." "And you didn't think to tell me?" I interrupted, my voice rising. "Your wife? The mother of your child?" "We were scared, Molly," Abigail said, tears streaming down her face. "We didn't know how to tell anyone. And then when we found out about the genetic risk for our babies..." My heart clenched. "What genetic risk?" Nathan knelt in front of me, taking my hands in his. "There's a chance our baby might have a rare genetic disorder. It's why Abigail and I have been spending so much time together. We've been consulting specialists, trying to figure out our options." I pulled my hands away, feeling sick. "So you've been lying to me, sneaking around behind my back, all because you couldn't find the courage to tell me the truth?" "I'm so sorry, Molly," Nathan pleaded. "We never meant to hurt you. We were just trying to protect everyone." "Protect everyone?" I laughed bitterly. "Look around, Nathan. Does anyone in this room look protected to you?" Janet was still crying softly, comforted by a guilt-ridden Richard. Abigail looked like she wanted the floor to swallow her whole. And Nathan? Nathan just looked lost. I stood up, my legs shaky but my resolve firm. "I think I've heard enough. I need some air." As I headed for the door, Nathan called after me. "Molly, wait, where are you going?" I turned back, taking in the scene one last time. This family, with all its secrets and lies. My husband, torn between loyalty to his sister and his wife. My unborn child facing an uncertain future. "I don't know," I said honestly, "but I do know this. I can't stay here. Not now. Maybe not ever." With that, I walked out, ignoring the pleas behind me. As I got into my car, my hands shaking as I gripped the steering wheel, I realized I had no idea where to go or what to do next. But one thing was clear: nothing would ever be the same again. And as I drove away from the house that held so many shattered dreams, I knew I had a choice to make. Fight for this family that had betrayed me, or forge a new path on my own. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of hope. Whatever came next, I would face it on my own terms, for myself and for my child. The manila envelope felt heavy in my hands as I stood outside Nathan's office. My heart raced, but my resolve was ironclad. This was it. The moment that would change everything. I took a deep breath and pushed open the door. Nathan looked up, surprise flickering across his face. "Molly, what are you doing here?" "We need to talk," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Now." He nodded, gesturing for me to sit. I remained standing. "I've made a decision, Nathan," I said, placing the envelope on his desk. "I want a divorce." The color drained from his face. "Molly, please, we can work this out. I know I messed up, but..." "No," I cut him off. "There's no working this out. You lied to me. You put Abigail before me, before our child. I can't trust you anymore." Nathan's eyes filled with tears. "What about the baby? Our family?" I placed a protective hand over my swollen belly. "I'll raise this child on my own if I have to, but I won't subject them to a life of lies and divided loyalties." Just then there was a commotion outside. The door burst open, and Richard and Janet rushed in, followed closely by Abigail. "We heard you were here," Janet said, breathless. "Molly, dear, please reconsider. We're family." I laughed bitterly. "Family? Is that what you call this mess of secrets and betrayal?" Richard stepped forward, his face grave. "Molly, I know we've all made mistakes, but surely we can find a way to move past this, for the sake of the children." "The children," I repeated, my anger rising. "You mean the children who might have life-threatening genetic disorders because of your affair? The children who will grow up in a web of lies unless someone has the courage to break the cycle?" Abigail sobbed quietly in the corner. "I'm so sorry, Molly. I never meant for any of this to happen." I turned to her, my voice softening slightly. "I know, Abigail, but intent doesn't change the outcome. We all have to live with the consequences of our actions." Nathan stood, reaching for me. "Molly, please, I love you. We can get through this together." I stepped back, out of his reach. "No, Nathan, love isn't enough. Not anymore." I picked up the envelope and handed it to him. "These are the divorce papers. I'm asking for full custody with supervised visitation for you. I also want alimony and child support." Nathan's face crumpled as he leafed through the documents. This is everything. You're taking everything." "Not everything," I said quietly. Just what I need to start over, to give our child a chance at a life free from all of this. Richard cleared his throat. Now, Molly, let's not be hasty. Perhaps we can come to some sort of arrangement. For the sake of the family name. The family name? I exploded. Is that all you care about? Your precious reputation? Janet stepped in, her voice pleading. Molly, dear, we can help. We'll support you and the baby. You don't have to do this alone. For a moment, I wavered. The thought of facing single motherhood was terrifying. But then I looked at their faces. Nathan's guilt, Abigail's shame, Richard and Janet's desperate attempts to maintain control, and I knew what I had to do. I appreciate the offer, I said, my voice firm. But I think it's best for everyone if I make a clean break. This family has too many secrets, too much baggage. My child deserves a fresh start. I turned to leave, but Nathan's voice stopped me. Molly, wait, what about the genetic testing? What if our baby needs us, all of us, to get through this? I paused at the door, my hand on the knob. The weight of everything, the lies, the betrayal, the uncertain future, pressed down on me. For a moment I felt like I couldn't breathe, but then I felt a small kick from within, my baby reminding me of what was truly important. I turned back to face them one last time. If that happens, I said, my voice barely above a whisper, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it, but for now this is goodbye. As I walked out of the office, leaving behind a chorus of protests and pleas, I felt a strange mix of terror and exhilaration. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in months, I felt like I was finally taking control of my own destiny. Whatever came next, I would face it on my own terms, for myself and for my child. The hospital corridor seemed endless as I waddled towards the maternity ward, one hand on my swollen belly, the other clutching my overnight bag. This was it, the moment I'd been dreading and longing for in equal measure. As I approached the nurse's station, a familiar voice called out, Molly! I turned to see Nathan rushing towards me, his face a mix of concern and excitement. Behind him, Abigail waddled along, her own pregnancy now in its final stages. What are you doing here? I asked, my voice tight with pain and emotion. Nathan reached for my hand, but I pulled away. I know I don't have the right, he said, but I couldn't miss this. It's our child, Molly. Before I could respond, a contraction hit me hard. I doubled over, gasping. She needs help, Abigail called out, and suddenly I was surrounded by nurses, being ushered into a delivery room. The next few hours passed in a blur of pain, sweat, and determination. Through it all, Nathan stayed by my side, holding my hand, whispering encouragement. Despite everything, I found myself grateful for his presence. Finally, with one last push, our daughter entered the world. As her cries filled the room, I felt a love so fierce it took my breath away. She's beautiful, Nathan whispered, tears streaming down his face. As the nurses cleaned her up, a doctor approached us, his face serious. Mr. and Mrs. Walker, we need to run some tests. Given your family history, reality came crashing back. The genetic disorder, the reason for all the secrecy and pain. Do whatever you need to do, I said firmly. The weight was excruciating. Nathan paced the room while I cradled our daughter, memorizing every perfect feature. Finally, the doctor returned. I have good news, he said, smiling. Your daughter is perfectly healthy, no signs of the genetic disorder. Relief washed over me, so powerful I thought I might faint. Nathan collapsed into a chair, sobbing with joy. Just then a commotion erupted in the hallway. Abigail's voice, filled with panic, carried into the room. Something's wrong. The baby. Nathan's head snapped up, torn between staying with us and going to his sister. I saw the conflict in his eyes, the same one that had torn our marriage apart. In that moment, looking down at our healthy daughter, I made a decision. Go, I said softly. She needs you. Nathan hesitated. Molly, It's okay, I said, surprising myself with how much I meant it. We'll be here when you get back. As Nathan rushed out, I held our daughter close, marveling at the twist of fate. After everything we'd been through, she was the one untouched by the family's dark legacy. Hours passed. I dozed fitfully, waking to every little sound. Finally, Nathan returned, his face etched with grief. Abigail's baby, he began, his voice breaking. I'm so sorry, I whispered, meaning it despite everything. Nathan looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time in months. Molly, I know I don't deserve it, but I want to try again, to be the husband and father you both deserve. I gazed down at our sleeping daughter, then back at Nathan. The anger and hurt were still there, but alongside them was something else. Understanding, compassion, maybe even the seeds of forgiveness. I can't promise anything, I said slowly, but for her sake, I'm willing to try, to find a way forward together. Nathan nodded, tears in his eyes. That's all I ask. As the sun rose on a new day, I felt a glimmer of hope. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. There were still wounds to heal, trust to rebuild, but looking at our daughter, I knew we had a reason to try. Whatever came next, we would face it as a family. Not the perfect, unblemished family I'd once dreamed of, but a real one. Flawed, complicated, but bound together by love and the promise of a new beginning. As I drifted off to sleep, our daughter nestled safely in my arms and Nathan keeping watch nearby, I realized that sometimes the most beautiful things can grow from the most broken places. And that perhaps was the greatest lesson of all.
I have been someone who loved my own company. I am Kimberly, and I am 30 years old teaching physics at the college_family, marriage. All that jazz, not really on my map. Inheritance from my granddad, this quaint little spot is mine all the way. It is my piece in the hustle and bustle. So there I was, hitting the pavement in the park for my morning run, when this scene unfolds right in front of me. A guy not watching where he's going takes a spectacular dive, and his phone goes flying. The thing hits the ground and bam, it's a goner, shattered screen, bits everywhere, the whole 9 yards. He's cussing up a storm, face all twisted in frustration. Clearly, the phone's the least of his worries. Looks like he's about to tear his hair out. Great, just great, this is all I needed today, he groans, staring at the remains of his phone like it personally offended him. I slowed down, kind of hovering, not sure why. Maybe it's the look of utter defeat on his face. You need to borrow a phone? I ask, keeping it casual. He looks up, kind of surprised that someone is talking to him. Yeah, that'd be great, actually. Need to call my folks, tell them I botched up something important. I unhook my phone from my armband and hand it over. Don't sweat it, just make it quick. Yeah, sure. Thanks a ton, he says, and he's on the phone in a heartbeat, pacing a small circle as he talks. His voice is all polite now, a total switch from the cursing fit seconds ago. Listen, I've had a bit of a mishap. He's glancing at me. A silent plea for a bit more time. I nod, letting him know it's all right. Finishing up, he hands back my phone with a sheepish look. Thanks, I owe you one. I'm Jack, by the way. Kimberly, and forget about it. Just try not to smash it next time, yeah. I say, half joking. He chuckles, running a hand through his hair. Deal. I'll make it up to you. Coffee sometime. I raise an eyebrow. Are you planning on throwing the coffee on the ground too? Elas, a genuine hearty sound. Promise I'm less clumsy with coffee cups. What do you say? I consider it for a moment. Not usually my thing, chatting up strangers, but something about this feels different. All right, Jack, coffee. But if you're late, I'm leaving, I say with a smirk. That coffee with Jack, it turned out to be the first of many. Something about him made me toss my stranger danger manual out the window. He was easy to talk to, with a laugh that made you want to join in, even if the joke was lame. We found this little hole-in-the-wall cafe, the kind where the coffee's strong enough to put hair on your chest, and the owner knows everyone by name. We became regulars, our conversations stretching from physics to philosophy to the downright ridiculous. So you're telling me if you could, you'd teach physics to cats. Jack asked me one day, a mischievous twinkle in his eye. I took a sip of my coffee, playing along. Absolutely. Imagine the breakthroughs. Schrodinger's cat would have a whole new meaning. He laughed, shaking his head. You're nuts, you know that, right? Take one to know one. I shot back, smiling. Things with Jack just clicked. It wasn't long before our coffee dates turned into dinner dates, movie nights, and lazy Sundays spent doing nothing together. It was easy, comfortable, and frighteningly quick. One evening, as we were closing down the cafe, with our lingering goodbyes, Jack turned serious. Something I'd come to learn meant he had something important on his mind. Kimberly, he started, hesitating a bit. "We're great together, aren't we?" I nodded, curious about where this was leading. "Well, I was wondering, what do you think about making this a forever thing?" My heart skipped. "You mean like marriage?" "Yeah, marriage," he confirmed, his voice firm, but his eyes searching mine for any sign of hesitation. I paused, not because I doubted my feelings, but because the gravity of the decision weighed on me. Yet, looking into his hopeful eyes, I found my answer. "Yes, Jack. Let's do it. Let's get married." The whirlwind that was our engagement sped by, and before I knew it, wedding bells were practically ringing in my ears. But there was this one little hiccup before we could say our I does. Jack's folks wanted to meet me. No biggie, right? Wrong. The meet and greet was at their place, which was fancy enough to make you think twice about where you sat. They were polite, but had this way of looking at you, like they were trying to read the fine print on your soul. So Kimberly, his dad starts, smooth like he's practiced this speech a few times. "Jack tells us you're a teacher." "Physics, was it?" "Yeah, that's right," I reply, keeping my tone friendly but guarded. "And you live in that lovely little house by the park. Quite the inheritance." His mom chimes in, her eyes sharp, trying to pin me down. I just nod, sensing where this is heading, but not wanting to jump the gun. "It's just that our Jack is quite the successful businessman, you know. We're just a tad concerned, no offense, dear, that some might be more interested in his financial stability," his dad says, dancing around the real accusation. I couldn't help but laugh, the absurdity of it all bubbling up. "Trust me, I've got my own, thanks." Not here for a free ride. Their faces tighten, not expecting my blunt honesty. Or maybe they did, and it was all part of the test. "Well, in that case," his mom says, pulling out this document from nowhere, "we'd feel more at ease if you two considered a prenuptial agreement." "Sure," I shrugged, taking the paper. "Makes sense to me. I like knowing where I stand. Plus, my house isn't up for grabs." Their surprise was almost worth the awkward tension. I guess they weren't used to straightforward answers. Jack seemed relieved, squeezing my hand under the table like he was saying thanks for not bolting. So we signed their precious prenup, sealing the deal that what's mine is mine, and what's his is his. Fair's fair, but the taste it left in my mouth was sour, made me wonder what kind of family I was marrying into. Living with Jack in my granddad's house started off as a dream. We'd laugh over burnt toast, dance in the living room to no music, and make plans for every inch of the garden. But like a storm rolling in slowly, things got cloudy, then downright stormy. And wouldn't you know it, the storm had a name: Jack's parents. These two could give lessons in arrogance. From day one, it was like I signed up for a third and fourth roommate who had a key, but never heard of rent. They'd swan into our place like it was a diner, feet up, waiting for the special of the day. And when they hinted they wanted to go on this fancy cruise, but their wallets were too thin, they looked at me like I was the bank. "No," I told them, "you think I declared war." They threw a fit, calling me stingy, saying I hoarded my cash like some dragon sitting on gold. Word gets around, and soon Jack's asking why I'm not more generous with his folks. Generous, Jack? They practically live off us as it is. I snapped back one night after his parents had left, our sofa and our fridge emptier than promises. "Their family, Kim, we're supposed to help out," he argued, missing the point by a mile. Helping is one thing, being taken for a ride's another. Your folks think my money's there to spend. That's not happening, I said. Jack went all quiet then, the kind of silence that's louder than shouting. His parents did the same, but in their way, by suddenly vanishing. No drop-by, no calls, nothing. They were offended because I wouldn't fund their holiday spree, called me greedy behind my back, said I was living too tight. All because I wouldn't open up my granddad's safe to splurge on them. Ah, the safe, that hulking piece of metal, was more than a place to stash away a few valuable bits and bobs. It was a slice of history, a connection to my granddad. But to them, just a vault they hadn't cracked. The months without Jack's folks were like the quiet before the storm. It was a Tuesday, the kind of day you don't expect anything out of the ordinary. I was late coming home from work, bogged down with papers and the remnants of a headache that wouldn't quit. Walking in, I found Jack's parents parked on our sofa, remote in hand, flipping through channels like they owned the place. Evening, I managed, trying to keep the edge out of my voice. Oh, there she is. We were wondering if you'd join us tonight, his mom said without looking away from the TV. I glanced at Jack, hoping for some backup, but he was engrossed in something on his laptop. Sighing, I headed to the kitchen, only to find they'd helped themselves to leftovers I was planning to make into dinner. That was it. I was done playing nice. Okay, listen up, I said, striding back into the living room. This is not a hotel, and I am not the maid. Jack looked up, startled, while his parents finally paused their channel surfing. What's gotten into you? His dad asked, frowning. I'm tired, I shot back, tired of coming home to find you two camped out here, eating my food, and treating this place like it's yours. It's not. The room went silent. You could have heard a pin drop, or in this case, the tick of the clock marking the moment everything changed. You could have heard a pin drop, or in this case, the tick of the clock marking the moment everything changed. His mom stood, smoothing her skirt. Well, I never. Here we thought we were family, but clearly we were mistaken. That's not what I'm saying, and you know it. I'm just asking for some respect, some space, I tried to explain, but the look on her face told me she wasn't buying it. Jack's dad chimed in, his voice cold. Seems like someone's true colors are showing. We just wanted to be close to our son, but apparently that's too much for you. I looked at Jack, searching for some sign of support, but he was torn, caught between us and them. Maybe it's best if we leave, his mom said, her voice laced with hurt I wasn't sure was entirely genuine. Maybe that is best, I agreed, more to myself than anyone else. They left, and with them, the false pretense of one big happy family. Jack and I stood in the silent aftermath, the rift between us wider than ever. The breaking point hit like a wrecking ball. Jack had always been a bit of a mama's boy, but I never figured it would get this bad. His folks, they had their hooks in deep, and Jack danced to every tune they played. It wouldn't have been so bad if it stopped there, but no. Jack started treating me like I was part of the staff in my own house. Hey, can you whip up something nice for dinner? I'm starving, Jack would say, dropping his bag by the door like he owned the place. Jack, I've been on my feet all day, teaching and grading. How about you cook tonight? I'd reply, trying not to let my irritation bubble over. But instead of understanding, he'd huff, puff, and make it seem like I was the one being unreasonable. And let's not even start on the Fridays he'd roll in past midnight, reeking of booze, with that "what's the big deal" look plastered on his face. One evening, I'd had enough. We need to talk, Jack. This isn't working, I said. He just stood there, swaying slightly, with that clueless look of his. What's not working? Us, Jack. Us. Your parents treat this place like a free hotel. You treat me like I'm here to serve. And I'm tired all the time. Tired. I could have said a lot of things then, could have apologized, could have promised to change. But no, he got all defensive, as if I was attacking him out of the blue. "That's not fair, Kim. You knew what my family was like," he shot back. "Yeah, and I thought I was marrying you, not signing up to be the family doormat," I snapped. That was the moment when the last thread snapped. We looked at each other, really looked, and saw the chasm between us, too wide to bridge, too deep to fill. I think we should get a divorce," I said, the words tasting bitter. Jack's reaction was a mixture of shock and relief. It was clear this had been a long time coming for both of us. But when he told his folks, the glee in their voices was something else. "We always knew she wasn't right for you, son. Good riddance, and thank heavens for that prenup." His mom had chirped over speakerphone, her voice a little too loud, a little too cheerful. Jack packed his bags that night, his movements mechanical. There was no dramatic goodbye, no tearful plea for reconsideration. Just the soft zip of a suitcase and the click of a door. Life's funny, you know. Just when you think you've hit rock bottom, fate throws you a curveball. For me, that curveball was a lottery ticket, a last-minute buy on a whim, because hey, why not? My life was already a mess. Might as well throw a couple of bucks at a dream. The morning I found out I won, it was like any other, except my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. I thought it was a mistake, a practical joke maybe. But no, there it was. My ticket, my numbers staring back at me from the screen, winners through and through. So there I was, staring at the lottery ticket in my hand, the kind of stunned where you can't decide if you want to laugh or cry. $3 million. It felt like a joke, considering the mess my life was at that moment. Divorce papers not yet signed, and my soon-to-be ex and his folks were nothing but a headache I couldn't shake. The universe must have a sense of humor, because the next thing I know, Jack's car pulls up, him and his folks all smiles and fake warmth. They come barging into my place like it's some family reunion. "Kim, darling, we heard the news." "What a blessing," his mom starts, laying it on thick. "Let's put all this unpleasantness behind us, H. We're family." Jack chimes in, all hopeful. "Yeah, babe, think about it. We can start fresh, really make a go of it this time." I couldn't help it. I laughed, not the happy kind, but the kind that's sharp around the edges. "Start fresh with what?" "Your folks running the show." "No thanks, I'm good." Then Jack, oh Jack, he gets this look like he's been wronged, and says, "Come on, Kim, that's cold. You know I deserve half of that money. It's only fair." "Fair? Let's talk about fair, Jack. You and your parents treating me in my place like some kind of free-for-all, and now you want half of my win." "Not happening." His face went all kinds of red, anger, embarrassment, take your pick. His parents, too, looked like they'd swallowed lemons, all puckered and sour. "According to our prenup, that money is mine." "All mine. You got that," I said, holding his gaze, feeling a kind of power I hadn't felt in a long time. He sputtered, looking to his folks for backup, but I wasn't done. "And just so we're clear, this ticket," I waved it in the air before sliding it into my safe, "is staying right here under reliable protection." Their eyes, oh man, their eyes were like cartoon characters, almost popping out of their heads. It would have been funny if it wasn't so pathetic. Jack tried to argue more, but I cut him off. "No, Jack, it's over. This ticket is my ticket out of this mess, our mess, and you're not getting a dime." They left after that. Not much else they could say. The door clicking shut behind them sounded like the end of an era. My era of playing the good wife, the understanding partner. Then I rang up my sister, spilling the beans about my sudden windfall. We spent hours on the phone, dreaming big, trips abroad, fancy cars, You name it. The kind of chat that leaves your cheeks aching from smiling too much. And guess what? I added as our call was winding down. Jack already got his eyes on the prize, acting like we're suddenly best buddies again. My sister cackled on the other end. You'd better hide that ticket somewhere Fort Knox couldn't crack, especially from those vultures. I laughed. Oh, please, I've got it, all under control. It's tucked away nice and safe. Fast forward a week, and I'm jetting off to a teaching conference, my mind a whirlwind of lectures and potential networking. Not once did I suspect what was brewing back home. Coming back to an empty space where my granddad's hefty safe used to sit, you'd think I'd freak out. But no, I just burst out laughing, knowing Jack and his folks. I had a hunch about who the culprits were. Sure enough, as the sun dipped and the evening rolled in, Jack's frantic voice came blaring through my phone. "Kim, you need to fix this now." He was practically shrieking. "Fix what, Jack?" "The fact that you and your parents are a bunch of Keystone cops." I couldn't help the snark. It's not funny. We're at the police station. They think we tried to steal the lottery ticket. His voice was a mix of panic and disbelief. The ticket. Oh, that precious piece of paper. Except the real kicker. The one in the safe was a decoy, a copy I'd made just for kicks. The real deal was with me, secure in my purse. The image of them huddled around my granddad's old safe, visions of dollar signs in their eyes only to find a worthless piece of paper, was too good. I held with laughter, the sound echoing off my empty walls. You mean to tell me you stole my safe for a fake ticket?" I managed between fits of laughter. There was silence, then a muffled curse. "You can't do this to us, Kim. It's not right." "Right, Jack. The moment you decided to break into my house and steal my stuff, you threw right out the window. Enjoy explaining that to the cops." The call ended with a click, and I spent the rest of the evening laughing, the sound bitter but liberating. Imagining their faces, the moment they realized they'd been played, was a balm to the months of turmoil they'd put me through. The next day, I headed to the police station to give my statement. The look on Jack and his folks' faces when I walked in was priceless. They looked like they'd seen a ghost, a mix of guilt and sheer panic. "Kim, thank God you're here. Tell them this is all a misunderstanding." Jack blurted out, his eyes darting around, looking for an ally in me. I just stared at him, letting the silence hang heavy for a moment. A misunderstanding? Is that what we're calling breaking and entering these days? His parents started in on their spiel, tripping over their words, trying to paint themselves as victims of circumstance. It would have been comical if it weren't so pathetic. "Listen, I only came here to make things right," I said, cutting through their babble. Jack perked up, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. "So you'll help us?" I nodded, reaching into my bag. "Yes, by giving this to the officers." I pulled out the real lottery ticket, the legitimate claim to my winnings, and handed it over to the police officer standing by. Jack and his parents gasped, their faces going from hopeful to horrified in a split second. "That's the real ticket. The one you all were so desperate to steal was a fake, a decoy," I stated, my voice steady and clear. The officer took the ticket, looking between it and me. "This will certainly help clear things up," he said, noting down something in his notebook. "But why? Why would you trick us like that?" Jack's mom wailed, looking every bit the part of the wronged party. "Why? Maybe because breaking into someone's house and stealing is wrong." "You brought this on yourselves," I retorted, my patience wearing thin. Jack stood there, mouth agape as the realization sank in. "So what now? Are we going to jail?" "That's not for me to decide," I said, turning to leave. "But maybe next time you'll think twice before betraying someone who trusted you." After the whole debacle with the fake lottery ticket and the stolen safe, things moved quickly. The cops had enough to open a criminal case against Jack and his folks for breaking and entering, not to mention attempted theft. It was a mess, but a part of me felt vindicated seeing them finally face some consequences for their actions. The divorce papers came through not long after. Signing them felt like lifting a massive weight off my shoulders. It was official. I was free from Jack and all the drama that came with him. And the best part, I got my granddad's safe back. It was a little worse for wear after its adventure, but having it back in my house felt like getting a piece of my soul returned. I had the winning ticket cashed, the money securely tucked away, and a whole lot of options in front of me. But first, I needed to celebrate this fresh start, this new beginning I fought hard for. I called up my sister, the first person who rode this crazy train with me from the get-go. "Hey sis, how about a celebratory dinner on me?" I offered, feeling lighter than I had in months. "You kidding? I wouldn't miss it for the world." "You deserve this, Kim," she replied, her voice bubbling with excitement. That evening, sitting in a cozy corner of our favorite restaurant, we toasted to new beginnings and the future. "So what's the first thing you're going to do with your winnings?" my sister asked, sipping on her wine. I thought about it for a moment. First, a vacation somewhere far, with lots of sun and no memories of the past few months. Then, I don't know, maybe start a charity or invest in something meaningful. Something that makes a difference, you know. She nodded, her eyes sparkling. "That sounds just like you, Kim. Always thinking of others." After dinner, walking back to my car, my sister looped her arm through mine. "You know, I'm really proud of you, Kim. You handled everything with such grace." I smiled, a genuine smile that reached deep into my soul. "Thanks, sis. Couldn't have done it without you." As I drove home, the streets bathed in the soft glow of the streetlights, I felt a sense of peace. The kind of peace that comes from closing a long, turbulent chapter of your life and stepping into a blank page, ready to start anew. I had plans to make, dreams to chase, and for the first time in a long time, I was excited about what the future held. Sure, the road ahead might have its share of bumps and turns, but I was ready to face them head on, with my head held high and my heart open to whatever comes next.
I'm Harper, and I've never been the type to turn away from love stories where the guy sweeps the girl off her feet. So when Aaron showed up with all his sweet texts in the morning and calls at night asking about my day, I fell hard. It's almost laughable how quick I was to think this is it, this is love. My friends, they'd look at us and say we were cut from the same cloth, meant to be. But there was Grandma June with her head full of wisdom, and a lifetime of watching seasons change. She'd always say, "Harper, honey, watch the signs. When a man wants all your time, there's a chance he's not just in love. Could be he's trying to own you." I would laugh it off. Nana with her old-timey ideas about men and their ways. Aaron was different, or so I believed. There we were, on an evening that felt like every other evening we'd spent together, sitting on my worn-out couch. He held my hand a little too tight when he asked about my day. "Met anyone interesting at work today?" he asked. I'd tell him about the regulars, skipping over the mundane bits. It's the same folks every day, you know that, and no one knew, no one took an interest in you. His tone was casual, but his grip wasn't just the usual. "Why so curious?" I tried to pull my hand away lightly, trying to lighten the mood. "Just making sure we're good, that's all," he replied, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. We were drifting with the TV chattering in the background, filling the silence. It was the same subtle pressure I'd felt countless times before, but always managed to brush aside. It was then Grandma June's words crept back, making my heart sink a bit. There's a fine line, a warning I never really heeded. The night dragged on, we sat together, but my mind was miles away, tangled in Grandma June's warnings, and this knot in my stomach that just wouldn't loosen up. When Aaron left, he took part of my peace with him, locking the door behind him. I leaned back and let out the breath I'd been holding. I was alone with the silence of my apartment and the whispers of doubt that echoed louder in the space he vacated. I thought about calling Grandma June, but it was late, and this was my mess to figure out. As the digital clock on the microwave blinked to the rhythm of my unease, I realized that there's a thin line all right between love and a cage, and I was the one who ignored the signs, thinking they were roses instead of the red flags they really were. Aaron and I had said "I do," and we started our married life in my little home cloaked in ivy. But after we settled in, things began to change. One night we were sitting on our porch, the air filled with the scent of the nearby pine trees. Aaron's hand was resting on mine a bit too firmly, and his voice cut through the calm as he asked, "Who's that new guy working with you?" "Oh, that's just Peter, he's in the marketing department," I replied, trying to sound as neutral as possible. He hummed, and I could see that familiar tension in his jaw. I knew that look. It was the same one he had when he thought something wasn't quite right. Over time, Aaron's questions weren't just questions anymore. They were like probes digging for something he seemed convinced he'd find. Then he started on my clothes. It was a Sunday morning and I was picking out a dress for brunch with friends. "That one's pretty?" he said, nodding toward a neutral tone dress. "I was thinking of wearing the blue one. It's more cheerful," I suggested, holding up my favorite dress, the one that made my eyes shine a little brighter. He shook his head. "You'd stand out too much with the other one," he insisted. And it wasn't a suggestion. "But Aaron, it's just a dress," I said, trying to keep the peace. "Just trust me on this, Harper. I'm looking out for you," he said, but it didn't feel like looking out, it felt like locking up. His preferences spilled over from my wardrobe to our social life. Dinners with friends became less frequent, my phone buzzed less. And it wasn't long before those invites stopped coming in altogether. One evening, he flopped down on the couch next to me, a scowl on his face. "Mark called, wants us to meet them for drinks next Saturday. Told him we're busy," he said, reaching for the remote. "We are?" I asked, surprised. I hadn't seen Mark and Laura in weeks. They were our couple friends, the ones we used to double date with regularly. Aaron flicked through the channels, not meeting my eye. "We don't need to spend time with them so much. You've got me, and I've got you. That's enough, isn't it?" he stated. I should have argued, reminded him that we were our own people. But a part of me was too tired to fight over something I knew I couldn't win. "That's enough," I echoed, but it sounded like I was trying to convince myself. This was my life now. A life where what I wore and who I spoke to became territories Aaron felt entitled to claim. And every time I'd let it go, he'd take a little more. I was losing bits of myself. And it wasn't until I came across an old photo of myself laughing with friends that I realized just how much had been chipped away. I looked at the woman in that picture and wondered where her smile had gone. The thing about life is it's far messier than you'd expect, especially when love ties you down instead of setting you free. That's what it felt like with Aaron lately. Our love felt like walls closing in, disguised as just another part of married life. His new habit of showing up at my office out of the blue, turning up like he owned the place. And in a way, like he owned me too. "Just in the neighborhood," was his usual line, followed by a too bright smile. One evening at home, I decided to wear my favorite pencil skirt to work the next day. Aaron came into the room, his face twisted up in a way that made me brace myself. "Why do you need to wear that?" he barked, his temper flaring over nothing. "It's just a skirt, Aaron," I said, keeping my voice steady. I didn't want to fight, not again, but he didn't buy it. "It's not just anything, who are you dressing for, huh?" His voice was a sharp jab, his suspicion naked and unashamed. "I dress for myself, Aaron, since when is that a crime?" I tried to defend my choice, my independence, but even to my ears I sounded like I was reaching. The next morning rolled around, and my skirt, the one I had planned to wear, was gone. Not just that one, but half of my wardrobe seemed to have just vanished. Panic surged through me, a cold wave that made me dizzy. I found Aaron in the kitchen, his back to me, making coffee like it was any other day. "Where are my clothes, Aaron?" I demanded, my voice edged with fear and anger, a cocktail of emotions that made me sound more like a stranger than a wife. "They weren't appropriate. I did us both a favor," he said, his voice oddly calm, like he was talking about the weather, not my personal belongings. "A favor by deciding what I can and cannot wear. Are you listening to yourself?" I couldn't hide the shock in my voice, the disbelief that this was my reality. "It's for the best, Harper. You'll thank me later," he replied. And the way he said it, like he knew better, made my skin crawl. I was halfway into the FMLA form when the mask slipped, and Aaron's control showed its true face. Control, my independence, my choices. He was whittling them down, trying to reshape me into something smaller, more contained, something less me. As I sat at the kitchen table, his words echoing around the silent room, I realized my once warm and loving home had turned into something else. It wasn't safe or comforting, it was a beautifully decorated prison, and the man I married was the warden. The rest of the day passed in a blur. At work, I was a ghost, going through motions, smiling when necessary, but underneath, a storm was raging. That evening, I sat in the car outside the house for a long time, the engine humming softly. Stepping through that door took a strength I wasn't sure I had, because inside that house waited a life that was slowly suffocating me. The door creaked as I finally turned the key and stepped inside. The smell of dinner hit me, and there was Aaron, all smiles and kisses, acting like today was just another day. But it wasn't. And the sad thing was, I wasn't sure if tomorrow would be any different. At work, Mr. Jacobs, my boss, dropped a fat file on my desk. "Got a new project for you, Harper. It's going to need some late nights, but you're the best for the job." "Pleasure's all mine, Mr. Jacobs." I managed to smile, ignoring the sinking feeling in my stomach. At dinner, I broke the news. Aaron's fork clattered against his plate, his eyes narrowing to slits. "You'll quit," he demanded, words sharp and clear. "Aaron, quitting isn't as easy as you make it sound. I'm good at what I do, and yes, we do need the money," I reminded him, hoping some sense would seep into the conversation. But his fists balled up on the table, his anger as clear as day. "No wife of mine will slave away for some boss's whims," he almost yelled. It was right then that his mother, Evelyn, appeared like a ghost at our table, always on cue, always trembling with some kind of worry. "Harper, honey," she started, hands flitting like nervous birds. "Can't you just ease up a bit for Aaron? It wasn't right, none of it. But I loved him once, and I guess a part of me still clung to that. So I pitched the middle ground. How about a compromise? I'll work from home. Best of both worlds, right?" Aaron slumped back, the lines on his face smoothing out. "Fine," he muttered, almost sulking. Evelyn smiled, relieved, her pale eyes finding mine, a silent thank you. But me? I felt boxed in, the walls painted by Aaron's temper and framed by Evelyn's worry. As the days turned into weeks, my home office became my world. Aaron's occasional peeks over my shoulder, Evelyn's mid-afternoon calls to check in or to check up, hard to tell, made sure my leash was short. Work was hectic enough to keep my mind from wandering to dark places. Mr. Jacobs was a tough old bird, but fair. "You're holding up the fort, Harper," he said in one of our phone check-ins, his voice crackly but kind. "Keep it up." I remember one evening, the sun had just dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of tired blue. Aaron sat on the couch, remote in hand, flipping channels without really watching anything. I closed my laptop, my brain fried from hours of numbers and emails. "Work's done for now," I told him, my voice a weekday kind of tired. He grunted a noise that wasn't yes or no, just Aaron. "For I heard you." I joined him on the couch, the cushion sinking under me, weary like my bones. Out of the blue, he said. You've been talking to Jacobs a lot about work. Yes, it's work, Aaron, I said, keeping my eyes on the TV, not wanting to start another row. He hummed, that old familiar sound of gears grinding in his head. That's life with Aaron, where my love's blindfold only got tighter, and every step forward felt like 2 steps back. The woman in the mirror started to look like a stranger, her eyes holding questions I was scared to answer. One day I needed a ride, and Grandma's place was too far to walk, so I grabbed a taxi. The driver was just some regular guy doing his job, dropped me off at my place, and that should have been that, except it wasn't. Aaron was out front waiting, and the sight of me stepping out of the taxi set him off big time. The driver had barely handed me my change before Aaron was on him. What's going on here, huh? Aaron snapped, eyes bulging. Who's this? Chill out, Aaron. I tried to cut in, but Aaron wasn't having it. The driver, seeing trouble, didn't waste a second, put the car in gear, and took off. Smart man. Once we were inside, Aaron was still fuming. He paced back and forth, throwing accusing glances my way. I sighed, not up for the drama. Really, Aaron? You're freaking out over nothing. It's not nothing. Who knows what you were doing in there? Aaron's voice boomed through the small space of our entryway. I rolled my eyes. Get over yourself. Things settled down after that, but not for long. A couple of days later, I caught Aaron snooping through my phone while I was making dinner. Hey, what do you think you're doing? I barked, snatching the phone from his hands. I was just... He trailed off, looking like a kid who got caught with his hand in the cookie jar. Do you mind telling me what's so interesting in my phone? I was getting really tired of this. Aaron rubbed the back of his neck, avoiding my eyes. I don't know, I guess I was just checking on you, making sure you're not hiding anything. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Checking on me? Are you for real right now? You think that's okay? He didn't say anything for a moment. Then I'm sorry, all right? I'm sorry. It won't happen again. You're right. It won't happen again because this is ridiculous. You're acting like a crazy person. My patience was wearing thin. Look, I said. I'm sorry I screwed up. Forgive me, okay? His voice had softened. I'm sorry, I promise it won't happen again. We left it at that. I wanted to believe things would get better. Part of me knew it was a long shot, but I still had hope. I guess that's how it goes sometimes. You see red flags, warning signs, but you just keep driving past them, hoping you'll somehow end up on a different road. It all started one crisp morning when I noticed a car, a nondescript dark sedan, a little too clean, a little too still. I saw it from my kitchen window, parked on the next street over. No big deal, I thought, it's probably just visiting somebody. But then I saw it again, by the grocery store, just sitting a couple of aisles over in the parking lot. And again, near the dry cleaner. Same car, same place. Like a bad penny that kept turning up. A week of this, and I couldn't brush it off any longer. I needed to know. So on a day when the car tailed me to the local library, I took a detour on my way home. Sure enough, the car was still there, matching my turns, keeping its distance, but always present. When I parked it on a side street, the sedan stopped a little way behind me. This was no coincidence. It's funny how your mind doesn't want to believe something's wrong, even when it's staring you in the face. It seemed so stupid, so out of a cheap detective show, but there it was. My heart was racing, a mix of fear and anger bubbling up inside me. I picked up my phone and called the police. I think I'm being followed, I whispered, as though the guy behind me could hear. The police took it seriously. They arrived quickly, talked to the man in the car, and checked his ID. Within minutes, they confirmed my fears. The guy was a private detective, and yep, he was following me. Following me on my husband's dime. I was shaking when I got home, with the police report clutched in my hand. Aaron was there, lounging on the sofa like any other evening, blissfully unaware that his little game was up. Aaron? I yelled, throwing the door open wider than I intended. What the hell is this? He jumped up, startled, his eyes doing that darting thing they do when he's on the back foot. Harper. A private detective. Aaron? I could barely get the words out, my voice shaking so hard. You have me followed. He started stuttering some excuse, his face flushed and guilty looking. Don't. Just don't. I stopped him, holding up a hand. I couldn't bear to hear any lie he might conjure. You know what? I can't do this. My voice broke, but I pulled myself together. You need to leave, Aaron. His mouth snapped shut. He looked like he might argue, but then he didn't. He just grabbed his coat and left without another word. I was alone, truly alone, and for the first time in years, that didn't scare me. It felt like the only honest thing I'd had in a long time. That day had a weird start to begin with. I was still adjusting to a quieter house since I told Aaron to pack his stuff and leave. The man was many things, but quiet wasn't one of them. The peace was nice, but I gotta say, a bit eerie too. And then there's a knock at my door that broke the silence like a dropped plate. Standing there was Mr. Freeman, Aaron's boss. Medium height, always looked like he starched his face along with his shirts. Never really liked him, but today he showed up holding a folder stuffed with papers. He's not here, I said before he could step inside. Mr. Freeman frowned, probably not used to doors not swinging wide for him. I've got some important documents for him, work stuff, he said. I sighed. If Aaron had $1 for every time he was important, we'd be living in a mansion. Well, he's not here. Can I give them to him when he comes back? Mr. Freeman considered it, then nodded. I suppose. Can I come in for a moment? I've been driving for hours. Aaron's car was as fancy as his suit, all black and shiny out there. But sure, I thought, why not? I ushered him inside and waved at the kitchen. Take a seat. You want some tea? He plunked down like a sack of flour, weary from the road or life, hard to tell. Tea would be good, thank you, Harper. I put the kettle on and scooped some leaves into the pot. Professional habit. I used to like playing the good hostess. That's when I saw it through the kitchen window. Flames dancing around Mr. Freeman's car like it was celebrating something. I shoved Mr. Freeman's tea towards him, half made. Your car. We bolted outside, and there was Aaron, my estranged husband, smiling like it was his birthday, and someone brought him a surprise cake. The crazy in his eyes glinted like the flames. Mr. Freeman blurted out, My car! What the hell is happening, Aaron? Aaron turned towards us, his smile flickering. Hey, Harper, this is for stealing my life. Say hello to your lover. His words slurred with satisfaction, mixed with a decent dose of lunacy. He thought he was getting back at some imagined lover of mine, I said. Mr. Freeman stood frozen, his face shifting from confusion to anger. Aaron, did you do this? Aaron's smile slid off his face faster than ice cream on a hot day. When he finally put two and two together, his boss, his wife, his mistake. Boss, I didn't know. Mr. Freeman cut him off. I don't care. You set my car on fire thinking it belonged to... To whom? God, Aaron, I had the contract renewal papers with me. Consider them and your job ashes now. You're done. Aaron fell to his knees quicker than a sack of those same papers, growling like a kid caught with his hand in the cookie jar. Please, Mr. Freeman, Save it. Mr. Freeman's voice was ice. I'm calling the police. The sirens didn't take long. The street filled up like a blocked sink. Neighbors, cops. A few pointing phones like we were the evening's cheap entertainment. As the cop slapped cuffs around Aaron's wrists, his knees still dusty from the driveway, I felt 100 weights lifting off me. One fire down, the rest of the mess to clean up. Mr. Freeman just shook his head, looking at what used to be a car. Last I saw of Aaron was him trying to look at me over his shoulder, eyes all rabbit-like with panic. Stepping into my living room felt strange. The whole mess with Aaron was coming to a close. The divorce papers had been filed, and I told him to stay away. He obviously didn't listen, since now he was looking at jail time for torching his boss's car, and then some for stalking me. The boss, Mr. Freeman, didn't take too kindly to his car being barbecued. He canned Aaron and then slapped a lawsuit on him. And standing there, I couldn't help but feel a weight lift off my shoulders. "Harper, honey," Grandma June called from the kitchen. "You need anything?" I shook my head, walking in to meet her. Grandma June had this way of slicing through nonsense. "Gran, I'm good. But I should have listened to you about Aaron." She was at the sink, and she turned around, drying her hands on a dish towel. "Oh, honey. When will you learn to trust this guy?" She patted her belly with a chuckle. I couldn't help but laugh. She always kept it so real. "Can't argue with Grandma's gut," I agreed. Afterwards, I sat on the couch, flipping through a magazine, but not really reading. It was just noise. Alone again, I felt surer than I had in months. This was the right move. Of course, there'd be more to deal with tomorrow. Lawyers, unpacking the mess Aaron left, figuring out money stuff. But tonight, it was just me. I pulled my phone out and texted Mara, my best friend since forever. "Free finally. Want to come over and crash my solo party?" It didn't take long for her to fire back. "On my way, bringing pizza." The rest of the night was going to be easy. No drama, no Aaron, just pizza, bad TV shows, and good company. I slipped into my comfiest sweatpants and pulled my hair back, finally able to breathe. The future might not look clear yet, but it looked a hell of a lot better than my past. I smiled to myself thinking about it. Uncomplicated, no strings attached, no more walking on eggshells. Yeah, this was how things were going to be from now on. Starting right now, with the new locks clicking into place. Freedom tasted a lot like pepperoni and cheese tonight, and that was just fine by me.
It was a normal Thursday night at our home, which is tucked away on the outskirts of a large metropolis. Tom and I had become accustomed to our routine. Me, Nora, glued to my laptop, following the most recent stock and cryptocurrency movements, and him, after a hard day at his auto repair shop, relaxing on the couch with a beer. We chose this cozy two-story house because it promised a family and a future. But suddenly it seemed more like a battlefield for our increasingly different lifestyles. So how was the market today? Although Tom's tone was casual, I could feel the strain behind it. "There will be ups and downs as usual. But crypto's looking good," I said, attempting to maintain harmony. Tom laughed and slammed his beer down a bit too hard. "Crypto once more. Not everything that sparkles is gold, you know." I closed my laptop and groaned, preparing for the exchange we'd had a million times. Furthermore, even if you find value in mending cars, you do it even if they are not worth fixing. How come you don't see the benefit of what I'm doing? Nora, because automobiles are real. You may sell them, mend them, and touch them. You're acting recklessly by throwing our money in the air in the hopes that it will return with more. I sensed the rage rising, getting tired of the same old debate. Careless. "No, Tom, it's not risky. It is planned. Gambling and investing are not the same thing." "I wish you'd try to understand that," I said. Tom got to his feet, now pacing. "Did you figure it out? Is it calculated to invest our hard-earned money in something as erratic as cryptocurrency?" "Yes, since I don't enter blindly, I do. I do my homework, I look at trends, and I make well-informed choices. It is identical to what you do with your store. My store is guaranteed to succeed, Nora. Automobile maintenance are always necessary. But this, it's only a phase. You know what happens when it crashes. Then what? Tom, any investment has the potential to lose money. The store may falter. We've seen nice returns on my investments, but nothing is certain. Isn't that something of value?" Frustrated, Tom put down his pacing and ran a hand through his hair. Nora, it's more than simply the money. It has to do with security. About not squandering everything on a stupid coin toss. Why are we unable to grow the store and make more investments? That's a practical, actual strategy to increase our funds. We placed all of our eggs in one basket, right? Tom, what would happen to the store? Investing 101 states that diversification is essential. He shook his head, our differences of opinion as wide as ever. Of course, diversification. However, not into this. Digital fairy dust, but into something solid. I felt compelled to defend my decisions and my freedom, so I got up. You know, for someone who runs his own business, you're surprisingly close-minded. And you're surprisingly stubborn, he was quick to respond. What I'm trying to convey is that we might use that money to construct something long-lasting. Let's just agree to disagree, okay? Something we can see and touch, not just numbers on a screen. As usual, the conversation was stalling. Neither you nor I will criticize the way you operate your store or my assets. With a sigh, Tom let go of the battle. Fine, but just remember, Nora, when all this blows up in your face, don't say I didn't warn you. The pressure in our lives was not limited to the conflict between Tom and myself. Complicating matters further were the dynamics of his family. We had to connect frequently because he lived near to his parents and sister, which served as a reminder of our divergent perspectives on duty and family. On a Sunday afternoon, Tom proposed that we go see his folks. Just thinking about it made my stomach turn. I didn't mind Tom's sister, Sarah, but not the parents. Her choices and way of life left me constantly perplexed. Come on, Nora. Mom has been inquiring about you and other things, and we haven't seen them in a long time. After observing my hesitancy, Tom persisted, you know Dad is fighting cancer. I whispered, yeah, I bet Sarah's missed me too, so Tom might understand my cynicism. Look, I know you two don't see eye to eye, but can't you just, I don't know, try for me? I sighed in agreement. Fine, but I'm not staying if she starts on one of her shopping spree stories. When we got there, Sarah was already there, showing off her newest high-end purse. I was immediately annoyed by her attitude of superiority, which was like a scent. Take a look at this. I received it yesterday. Almost ignoring us, she said, isn't it fantastic? It's something, I said, gritting my teeth. Tom's mother invited us in without seeing the tension. I'm so happy you were able to attend, Nora, sweetie. Both of you ought to come more frequently. Sarah dominated the discussion as the afternoon went on, sharing her most recent shopping and vacation experiences. I tried to maintain a straight face and spoke as little as possible, but I was becoming impatient. So Nora, still playing with your stocks and bits. Sarah scoffed, contempt evident in her voice. Sarah, that's called investing. I snapped back, my irritation showing. You ought to give it a try sometime instead of wasting money on unnecessary items, I said. Tom shot me a warning look, but it was too late. Investing? Please, like gambling on the internet is anything to brag about. At least when I spend my money, I have something to show for it. Something to show until it goes out of fashion next season. I retorted, unable to help myself. That's enough, both of you. Tom's father interjected, his tone stern. We're here to enjoy each other's company, not argue about whatever this is. The rest of the visit passed in an uncomfortable silence. As we left, Tom couldn't hold his frustration back. Nora, why do you have to provoke her? Can't you just let it go for one afternoon? Me provoke her. She's the one who started it with her snide remarks. I'm just not going to sit there and take it, Tom. It's just, sometimes I wish you'd try a little harder for the sake of peace. Try harder. Tom, I'm not the one splurging on luxuries and flaunting them in everyone's face. Why doesn't anyone tell her to stop acting like a spoiled brat? Because she's family, Nora. We look out for each other, even if we don't always agree with what they're doing. That's just it, Tom. Looking out for each other is one thing, but enabling bad behavior is another. There's a reference, and it's about time someone pointed it out to her. Tom sighed, the weariness evident in his voice. I know, but what can we do? She's set in her ways, and Mom and Dad aren't going to change how they treat her. It's not just about Sarah, Tom. It's about us too. How are we supposed to plan for our future when there's always going to be this financial black hole in your family? We'll figure it out, Nora. We always do. The news hit us hard and fast. Tom's dad, Mr. Harrison, had lost his battle with cancer. It felt like one moment we were discussing treatment options, and the next we were plunged into mourning. Amidst the shock and grief, Sarah, Tom's sister, took charge of the funeral arrangements. It wasn't long before she dropped a bombshell on us about the cost. Sitting in our living room, looking like a storm cloud had settled over his head, Tom relayed what Sarah had told him. Nora, Sarah says the funeral's going to cost $60,000. She's expecting us to chip in half. I nearly choked on my tea. $60,000, Tom, that's insane. Are we funding a funeral or a royal wedding here? Tom's face darkened, his eyes narrowing. Now's not the time, Nora. This isn't about the money. It isn't about the money. It's about giving my dad the send-off he deserves. But $60,000? There has to be a mistake. It's too much. Tom's voice rose, and I could see the vein in his forehead starting to pulse. My dad has just died, Nora, and here you are haggling over pennies. What's wrong with you? I flinched at his harshness. I'm not haggling, Tom. I'm just shocked. We never even spent that kind of money on our own house. Tom stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. You know what? I don't need this. I don't need you telling me what's too much for my own father's funeral. If you can't see past your damn spreadsheets for once, maybe you should just stay out of it. The hurt from his words cut deep, but I swallowed my retort. This was grief talking, not my Tom. I'm sorry, Tom. I'll transfer the $30,000 to Sarah. This is a lot to process. Tom paced the room, hands buried in his hair, a gesture of frustration I'd come to recognize over the years. Yeah, well, it's not just about the money, Nora. It's about doing right by him. And if that means paying whatever it costs, then so be it. When I confirmed the transfer to Sarah, Tom barely acknowledged it, lost in his own world of grief and anger. The distance between us felt like miles, not the few feet of our living room. Walking into the funeral agency, I felt the weight of the world on my shoulders. The last few days had been a blur of grief and confusion, but nothing could have prepared me for what I was about to learn. I'm here for Mr. Harrison's funeral, I announced to the woman behind the counter, trying to keep my voice steady. She looked up from her computer, her expression apologetic. I'm sorry, ma'am, but you're a day late. Mr. Harrison was cremated yesterday. My heart stopped. What? But how? I was told the funeral was today. She shook her head gently, her eyes full of sympathy. The family requested to move the date forward. I'm very sorry for your loss and the confusion. I stood there dumbfounded, my mind racing. How could Tom not tell me? Why was I left in the dark about such a significant change? Fuming, I dialed Tom's number, my fingers shaking with anger and disbelief. Tom, why the hell didn't you tell me the funeral was moved? I just showed up like an idiot, only to find out I missed everything. Tom's voice was cold, detached. Because I didn't think you cared. Nora, all you've done is complain about the costs and question every decision. Why would I think you'd want to be there? Because he was my father-in-law. Because I'm your wife. How could you just exclude me like that? My voice cracked, a mixture of hurt and fury. Well, maybe not for long, he shot back, and I could almost hear the bitterness seeping through the phone. What's that supposed to mean? I demanded, my heart sinking. I'm done, Nora. I can't do this anymore. I can't be with someone who's so indifferent. You're more concerned with your bitcoins and shares than with this family. I've got the divorce papers ready. His words were like a slap in the face. Divorce? Was he serious? You're kidding, right? Over this, Tom. We can talk about it. We can work things out. No, Nora. It's too late. The house is going up for sale. We'll split everything and go our separate ways. That's it. I was speechless. The reality of the situation crashed down on me. This wasn't happening. It couldn't be. Stunned, I wandered back to the parking lot, where I saw Sarah pulling in, driving her new luxury car. The sight of it made my blood boil. Nice car, Sarah. Where'd you get the money for this? Inheritance, she said, her smile not reaching her eyes as she tossed her hair back. Yeah, something like that. Dad left me a little something. The casual way she mentioned her father, shopping bags in hand, and not a trace of sadness on her face, was infuriating. A little something, huh? Looks like morning is treating you pretty well. Sarah's smile faded, replaced by a smirk. Well, we all grieve in our own ways, don't we? Some of us invest in stocks, and some of us in cars. I clenched my fists, the injustice of it all burning inside me. This was all wrong, Tom. I were falling apart, and here was Sarah benefiting from the chaos. Enjoy the car, Sarah. Looks like it cost a pretty penny, or should I say a pretty dollar. She laughed, a hollow sound that echoed in the empty parking lot. Oh, Nora, always so concerned about the money. Don't worry, it's all been taken care of. I watched her walk away, her laughter lingering in the air. The man I loved wanted nothing to do with me, and the family I had tried to be a part of was showing their true colors. The days following the funeral, visiting the funeral home felt like navigating through a thick fog of disbelief and betrayal. The weight of the divorce papers in my bag felt like carrying a boulder, a constant reminder of my crumbling marriage. But the sight of Sarah's new luxury car planted a seed of suspicion that I couldn't shake off. Determined to get to the bottom of it, I decided to pay a visit to the funeral home, hoping to uncover some answers. Walking into the funeral home, a mix of suspicion and determination fueled my steps. It felt surreal being here under these circumstances, but I needed answers. The place was quiet, the air filled with a solemnity fitting its purpose. At the reception, I recognized a face from the past. Jackie, a classmate from high school who'd ended up in the most unexpected of places. Jackie, I exclaimed, a bit too loudly for the setting. I didn't know you worked here. She looked up, surprise flickering across her face before recognition set in. Nora, wow, it's been ages. What brings you here? Something I can help with. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the conversation ahead. Yeah, actually, it's about my father-in-law's funeral. I heard it was arranged here. Jackie's expression turned professional, but there was a hint of curiosity in her eyes. Sure, let me pull up the details. Give me a sec. As she typed away, I fidgeted, the weight of the situation pressing down on me. The moment she found the record, her brows furrowed. Okay, here it is. The service was pretty standard. Cremation was requested, keeping things on the simpler side. The total came to $5,000. My heart sank. $5,000? But that's not what we were told. We paid $60,000, or at least, we were led to believe that's what it cost. Jackie paused, her face a mask of concern. That's a huge difference. It was Sarah who handled the arrangements, right? Everything here was billed at $5,000, no more. The pieces were starting to fit together, a picture I didn't want to see. Can you print me a copy of that bill? I need proof. Sure thing, Jackie said, her tone sympathetic. She quickly printed out a duplicate of the check and handed it to me. Holding the paper, it felt like a piece of a puzzle that would unravel a bigger deception. Thanks, Jackie. I've got to sort this out. Armed with the printout from the funeral home, my next stop was confronting the family, particularly Sarah. The air felt heavy as I drove to my mother-in-law's house, where I knew they'd all be gathered, probably discussing the estate and the aftermath of the funeral. My stomach churned with a mix of dread and determination. When I arrived, the house was eerily quiet. I hesitated at the door, gathering my courage before stepping inside. The sound of my footsteps seemed to echo through the hallway, announcing my arrival. In the living room, Tom, Sarah, the funeral, and my mother-in-law were seated, looking like a picture of mourning that was about to be shattered. My mother-in-law, her eyes shadowed with grief, broke the silence first. "Dear, we missed you yesterday at the funeral. We thought you'd be there." Taking a deep breath, I replied, "I was told it was today. I'm so sorry for your loss." My voice was steady despite the churn of emotions inside me. I then turned to Tom. "Can we talk in private?" I hoped to spare his mother any more distress. Tom's response cut through the room. "No secrets here. You're not part of this family anymore." His words stung, but I pushed on, pulling up the check from the funeral home. "Then explain this to me. The funeral cost $5,000, not the $60,000 Sarah claimed. Where did the rest go?" Tom looked genuinely shocked, turning to Sarah with a bewildered, "What's this about?" Sarah squirmed under our gazes. I needed the money," she finally admitted, her voice small. The revelation seemed to hang in the air until Tom's mom, overhearing, added, "Your father saved for his own farewell. I even gave Sarah $10,000 more to cover everything." I did the math out loud, tension rising. $70,000 in total and only $5,000 spent. "Sarah, where's the rest?" Flustered, Sarah confessed to splurging the money on a new car for herself, her gaze darting away, unable to meet mine. I expected Tom to explode, but instead, he almost tenderly told Sarah, "You shouldn't have done that. Be more careful next time." His response floored me. "Careful? She committed fraud, Tom, and you're okay with that." Tom's justification left me reeling. "You wouldn't understand. You've got no family. You don't get what it means to stick together." That was the last straw. In front of them all, I signed the divorce papers with a flourish. "Sarah, you owe me $30,000. Pay up, or I'm going to the police." Tom's protests followed me out the door, but I didn't look back. I'd seen enough, heard enough. The betrayal was complete, and so was my resolve. As I walked away, the finality of my actions settled in. There was no going back, only forward from here, away from the lies, and the deceit that had marred what I once thought of as family. Packing up my life into boxes felt surreal. Like I was an observer in my own story, the for sale sign outside the house was a stark reminder of the finality of it all. By afternoon, I was settling into a small apartment that felt more like a fresh start than a downgrade. That evening, as I was sorting through the remnants of my past life, my phone rang. Tom's name flashed on the screen, a name I no longer felt attached to. I answered, curiosity edging out resentment. "Nora, you need to back off." "Back off?" I laughed, cold and sharp. Not a chance, Tom. She took from me, and I want it back. Your sister is a thief. Tom was silent for a moment. She's family. You wouldn't understand. Family? I scoffed. That ship has sailed, Tom. As far as I'm concerned, you and your sister are just people I used to know. He tried to argue, but I cut him off. Save it. Sarah has 2 weeks to return my money, or I'm pressing charges. And you stay out of it. You're nothing to me now. Hanging up, I felt a mix of sadness and liberation. The man I once loved was now just another obstacle in my path to reclaiming my life. 2 weeks later, a knock at my door heralded the return of my $330,000. Sarah stood there, her posture defiant, a sneer playing on her lips. "Here's your money," she spat, thrusting an envelope into my hands. "Happy now, you money-grubbing witch." I took the envelope, my gaze steady. "It's not about the money," I called out. "Sarah, it's about principle, about not letting you walk all over people." She laughed hollowly and bitterly. "Whatever helps you sleep at night." As she turned to leave, I called out, "Just remember, Sarah, karma's a real pain. What goes around comes around." Closing the door, I leaned against it, the envelope heavy in my hand. The money was a small victory, but the real win was standing up for myself, refusing to be a victim of their greed and lies. Life had found a new rhythm, calmer and more predictable. I paused when my phone suddenly called and showed a number I hadn't seen in a long time. It was Tom, a voice from a time in the past that I had carefully put aside. "Hey, please do me a favor." A large one. I didn't realize how worn out Tom's voice sounded. I hesitated, startled by the abruptness of the call. "A favor?" I inquired. "Tom, we're past favors, don't you think?" This is Sarah. This time, she's in deep. The Wolts are at the door, and debt is up to her eyes. Even after selling the house and the store, it's still insufficient. It took a while to process what he had said. "You're phoning me, too." "Why, Tom, I'm no longer with the circus." He let out a desperate sigh. "Please stop acting that way. You left after making a lot of money trading. For the sake of the past, can't you spare something?" What I was hearing was unbelievable. He still viewed me as their mess's lifeline in spite of everything. After she almost destroyed us with her lies, could you spare her something? "Tom, you've got some guts." He said, "It's not just for her. It's for everyone. Without me, you wouldn't be where you are now. Remember that." I let out a quick, piercing chuckle. "I am not where I am because of you, but rather in spite of you. Do you believe I owe you? It's quite wealthy." There was a heavy, uneasy stillness on the line. "So that's it. Are you planning to abandon us?" "Us? It's not us, Tom. It has been a while since there was. Regarding turning my back, I believe you mistook me for someone who is still concerned." As I hung up, I had a mixture of feelings, including relief and fury. I had finally put an end to that phase of my life. I realized how far I had come as I was sitting in the living room of my new home, which I had won with hard work and cunning. This was my haven, based on my perseverance and diligence, rather than the dubious foundation of dishonesty and deception.